Okay, next up we have Lloyd Rees, is knowledge lawyer from Freshfields, Bruckhaus and Deringer LLP, and is providing his personal account of mental health and the legal profession. So thank you very much, Lloyd, and over to you.
Thanks very much for inviting me, and thanks for inviting me to the virtual conference as well. I must say I was looking forward to being in Harrogate in June, but you know, my old bedroom in South Wales in my parents' house is a pretty good backup, I think. Maybe not, but I'll let you decide that one. As was said, I'm a knowledge lawyer at Freshfields, Bruckhaus Deringer, a city law firm in London. I studied law at Cardiff University, then at BPP Law School in London before training and qualifying at Freshfields in London. I'm a knowledge lawyer, which is what some firms call a professional support lawyer. And my speciality is Brexit. I focus on the legal implications of the UK leaving the European Union. And I originally trained as a corporate lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions, so I also sit in that group as well. My plan today is to talk a little bit about my own mental health journey, which will explain why I became interested in this topic. I'm also going to touch a little bit then on the mental health and the legal profession, some of the particular topics that are very topical at the moment, including working from home, COVID-19. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the firm I work in on mental health. As was said earlier, if you've got any questions, please do use the Q&A function and I will come back to them at the end. So just to speak a little bit about my own personal history, I suffer and still do from depression and anxiety. I have on and off over many years had it better and worse, and various episodes have been particularly traumatic for me. Probably one of the worst, which I wrote about quite extensively, is an episode where I stopped taking some of the medication that I was prescribed. I should say that was on medical advice to do so. I didn't just decide to do it one day. And I ended up suicidal by the end of that episode, which was not a particularly pleasant experience, as you can imagine. But that whole episode was something that drove me to become very interested in our mental health, well-being, our general health, and what we as individuals and the organisations we work for can do to protect and further good mental health. So with that in mind, I've got a little poll that Matt is very kindly going to show up on the screen, which is just a question on general well-being and mental health. So if we could have the poll up, please. So I've asked you in the past week, have you done anything to look after both your physical and mental health? And then there's a couple of options there underneath. So if you could just vote on that, and we'll have a little look at the results then. Well, there's the results on the screen there. This is actually really interesting because I did a talk very similar to this about a year ago, and the vast majority of people who I spoke to said that they'd only really done something for their physical health. That very, very few people had done anything related to their mental health. So it's great to see 70% of people on this conference today have done something for both their physical and mental health. And I think that's probably related, isn't it, to this lockdown has strangely allowed us to become more interested and more alert to our own mental health. And I think, you know, it's very easy to understand how important your physical health is. You know, going for a walk, going to the gym, going to swim. It's easy to think about that. But mental health is a bit more difficult because I think it's not as obvious to people sometimes what you can do to further your mental health. And maybe in the chat, people can say what they do to promote good mental health, what they do to protect their mental health. That is a very important topic. So let me just turn to the legal profession a little bit. Why is mental health an important topic in the legal profession? Well, I think it boils down to, doesn't it, that it's a high-performing, high-quality profession which expects a lot of people. It's high pressure, it's high performance. And I think something that I was reading the other day which really struck a chord with me was this idea of what are the traits that attract people into the legal profession. And the legal profession can tend to be a bit perfectionist. It can be quite loyally, in the sense of, you know, we're argumentative sometimes. Things are right, things are wrong, cases are won, cases are lost. The deal is done, the deal isn't done. I think that can lend sometimes to a bit of a negative atmosphere, because lawyers in particular are trained to look for the negatives in what they do. When I went through my legal education and my training, when you review things, you often look for what could possibly go wrong in this situation. And that is quite a negative way to think if that pervades into other parts of your life. Often when lawyers review documents, they're looking at what could be the worst case scenario for this particular incident. It can often be very, 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 very unlikely that that will happen, but it can often get quite a lot of attention in that situation. And there is a danger, I think, sometimes that mindset can sort of infect other parts of your life, where you start looking at things in quite a negative way and thinking, what are the worst case scenarios for this particular incident or episode that I'm facing at the moment? Which is, as I said, I think why doing everything we can to protect and further good mental health is really important. And I'm just going to have a little look at the chat now to see what people have been saying. Yeah, and someone, Helen, has said to you, mindful sessions run weekly by the firm. COVID-19 has brought this to the fore and increased the need for many. And I think that's right, isn't it? We all, I think, have focused much more on our mental health now. And I've certainly had conversations with people about this topic who were not people who I think would have spoken about this before. And lockdown has actually made them become much more open on this topic. Let me just have a little look what others have said. Others have said walking, going to local nature reserves and gardening. Actually, for me, that's one of the main things that I do. I find going for a walk can be a really powerful thing. Obviously, we're not in the office at the moment, but I always make a habit of at lunchtime going for a walk, and trying to walk to work in the morning and in the evening. I find it a useful way to switch off at the end of the day. And lots of people use gardening, crafts, and various different activities like that. And I can see here someone says, there's days I love being at home and days when it's harder. And I think that's right, isn't it? There are days when we think that working from home at the moment is fantastic. There are days when it's really challenging. And I think also getting to grips with all the technology like this is really difficult, isn't it? Because it can be quite stressful if you're just about to start doing something like this and then things don't work. I mistakenly put my keyboard on top of my laptop just before this talk started, and managed to restart my computer. So there are all sorts of things you have to grapple with when you're working from home. And I think, you know, video conferencing is also a very new way for a lot of us to communicate. There are particular stresses that come with being constantly on video, people worrying about reacting in different ways. And also I think that, you know, sometimes we can be in a situation where presenting into an open void sometimes can be quite difficult. It's a very different experience to present to a room full of people who are physically in front of you, to actually speaking into, you know, what feels like no one, despite the fact I can see there are 208 people on this call. And I think, you know, the key message is we need to just remember that our minds and bodies are all connected together, as I can see someone has mentioned in the Q&A and chat at the bottom there. So if I can just move on just for the last bit to say about how things have been going where I work at Freshfields. Through Freshfields' wellbeing initiatives, I've trained along with many, many more people as a mental health first aider. Obviously, we've had physical first aiders for a very long time, but it's a relatively new thing, the mental health first aid. It's accredited and run by a charity called Mental Health First Aid England, and it equips you with a set of skills to deal with people who come to you who may be in a crisis, may not be in a crisis, but just want some help. They want someone to listen to, and our role is to actively listen to them and encourage them to seek support. And obviously the support that's available in an organisation will vary from one to another. But it's become a very useful way for people to have conversations, for us to signpost people to the right support, whether that's a sort of employee assistance line or external healthcare systems and things like that. I've done lots of training courses over the years and been to lots and lots of training sessions through my whole education. And I would honestly say the mental health first aid program training is one of the best, if not the best training program I've ever done because of the quality of the training and the skills that you learn, which actually are not just applicable in the workplace. There is a really, really useful set of skills you get that you can use with friends, family, and people who you just come into contact with every day. Something else which we've also done at Freshfields recently is I am the co-chair of our employee network on mental health. We call this our UK Mental Health Affinity Network. This brings together colleagues who are interested in mental health. They don't need to have suffered or be suffering with mental health to be a part of it. It's people who are interested in that as a topic, and we organise events. We are hoping to, become more vocal on particular topics, raise awareness, and we're hoping that it leads to many more conversations on this. And strangely, I think lockdown has actually, and the COVID-19 crisis has actually led us to a place where people talk about this so much more now. I think that, we've probably all been on the receiving end of emails over the years that start with, "I hope you're well." I think people now actually genuinely mean that. And I think there is a conversation that is now had about how people are feeling, what their home circumstances are. And I can, I can speak personally that I hope that mental health stays on the agenda and it becomes a big topic of conversation and change for a long time to come. So that's all I was going to say there. I wonder if we've had any questions in while I've been talking.
I think you've been answering them as we've been going along. Did you get Deborah's about, "I realise what I'm feeling is not an accurate reflection of reality. I need to interrogate what I'm feeling"?
Yeah, I think sometimes, and I think that's why talking to other people is also very useful sometimes. I find if I'm having something that I'm having difficulty dealing with, speaking to one of my friends or colleagues about it is often really useful because you get quite an objective view then on that particular incident. And and often I think sometimes by just speaking it out loud, you realize that there are issues with how you've mentally dealt with that issue, and you can come to a different viewpoint on it, I think.
And someone also mentioned that although we went into lockdown in March, should it have started in January, although by the time we were going into lockdown in March, the weather was improving. So how do you consider that situation?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because some people, I think that varies by the individual, because some people I've spoke to have said, "I'd much prefer to be locked down in the winter where there was no temptation for me to go out and do anything." Whilst there's other people who say, "Well, actually the sunshine cheers me up every day, and that's what gives me a bit of a boost every day." So I think that varies between people. But I agree with you. I'm not a big lover of the summer normally, but I must say the sunshine every day does give me a bit of a spring in my step, despite the fact in Wales I can't really go anywhere at the moment.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Lloyd. I found that really interesting, and again, I can't wait to see you next year. So that was.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.